Hey there, it's Sam. I'm going to be making some videos about learning astrology, and I'm going to be doing some, teaching some actual techniques and strategies that are very important for showing how to look into your chart and how to understand astrology better and see it working at a very high level. And I'm also going to talk about some large frameworks and structures because I think that's as important or more important than actual techniques and things like that. And in fact, today I'm going to start with the biggest, kind of most, the highest altitude and zoom out and talk about astrology on the level of this framework that I've understood or that I've sort of developed as a way to look at things, and that's the framework of principles, techniques, and outcomes. These are like the three kind of layers of learning in any sense, actually, and I'm going to show you what I mean. We have a principle. Well, actually, we are generally focused on our outcomes, so we look for a technique to get the outcome we want. For instance, let's say astrologically speaking, people want an outcome. The outcome is, I want to have a happier marriage. So they look for, either they'll look for an astrologer to tell them how to do it, but if you're looking for yourself, you'll say, well, what do I do? When you say, what do I do, then you're basically looking for a technique. A technique is, what do I do? What do I do to get a happier marriage? What do I do to have a better career? Well, maybe I'll ask an astrologer. That's a technique. That's a technique of yours, like a strategy or a technique to get a happier marriage. So we focus on techniques and outcomes. And we often neglect principles, which are much more upstream. They're much more all-encompassing. So, there's really, I'll say, nothing that can't be learned or grasped or figured out, or no outcome is higher than a principle. We can, as soon as we learn principles, outcomes take care of themselves. For instance, let me give you an example. Let's say, like for instance, a principle that makes relationships work is love. It's a principle. It is a principle of the universe. It's a law. It's a metaphysical law of the universe. It's called love. Another one is called compromise and sharing. This is a principle. Someone doesn't want to understand the principle, but they want the outcome. How well is that going to work? Let me give you a more tangible example. For instance, in the tangible world, let's say, again, we're very focused on outcomes. Let's say, as a species, humanity, we want to go to the moon. We want to land a rocket on the moon, right? Big outcome. That's an outcome. So we develop a technique, okay? What's the technique for landing someone on the moon? Well, we need to build a rocket. We need to have fuel. We need to do... Why do we need to do those things? Well, because we're dealing with principles. If we don't understand principles, our techniques will fail. So, I'll talk about this on the level of principles. Scientific principles are things like gravity. Gravity is a principle. For instance, speed, acceleration, velocity, time, proximity, decay. These are scientific principles, immutable laws of the universe, of the physical universe. I'm talking like physical sciences. Things move at a certain speed. Okay? We learned a long time ago, let's say for instance back in the 200 years ago, or even 100 years ago actually, even in many parts of the world now, I can only move so fast. Distance, time and distance, and speed are all kind of related to an outcome that would say, let's say the outcome is, I need groceries. Say let's say 100 years ago. I need groceries and the store is 2 miles away. It's either going to take me 2 hours to walk to the store and come back, or I can get on this animal who runs a lot faster than I can run, and it will only take me a half an hour. Because the animal can run there in 20 minutes, I can buy the stuff, then get on the animal and come back. That's a technique developed to maximize the principle of speed, distance, time. Speed, distance, and time are physical laws of the universe that we must honor, at least as we're in a physical body. And so getting, the domestication of animals, especially for transportation, was designed to meet this need of that helps us better manage this immutable law of the universe. If we don't understand this, then this isn't going to work. But obviously we function in this paradigm all the time. This paradigm of principles which are upstream from techniques which are tied to outcomes. Most astrology students, again, they focus on this. In our life, we focus on techniques and outcomes, forgetting principles. When I do astrology readings, you have to talk about all three. Here's a technique to do, say a mantra or whatever to get the outcome. But I have to, most of the time, if I really help the person, I have to explain them the principles that are not being honored. They're violating the principles, let's say, of relationships by not honoring, by not yielding, by not compromising, by not honoring their own space, or whatever it is. These principles are not working well. So for instance, there are principles of astrology. There are also metaphysical principles. We talk about scientific principles of the universe, like I said, the laws of nature, time, distance, acceleration, gravity. If we want that rocket to go to the moon, one things we need to overcome is gravity. We need to get out of the Earth's gravity. You can't change that. So evolutionary principles, I should say metaphysical principles rather, include things like evolution. It's a metaphysical principle. Everything is evolving. Consciousness, that's a metaphysical principle. Presence, that's a metaphysical principle. Karma, yin-yang, masculine, feminine, inner, outer. Love, it's a metaphysical principle of the universe. And there's a lot of them. But these are principles that underpin everything. Something like maybe courage is a principle. Truth is a metaphysical principle. Honoring truth and things like that. And so these metaphysical principles and scientific principles filter down into astrology and into life sciences like the Vedic life sciences. When we talk about the principle level of astrology, we're talking about things like the three gunas, body, mind, and spirit. This is a principle that when you look in the great Vedic astrology texts, these principles, the gunas, which are actually related to the three gunas of tamas, rajas, and sattva. I put them into everyday language of body, mind, and spirit. But this is how things evolve. When you start to bring these principles together, the principle of evolution, with the principle of the three gunas, which are form, emotion, and love, or truth, then you get everything evolves, the metaphysical principle, through the realm of body, mind, and spirit, through the three gunas. So you bring these principles together. You can take the principle of evolution with another astrological principle, which for instance is the 5 elements. 5 elements is an astrological principle. It's how things are made. So you can see how things evolve through each element. The element of earth, in the body sense, has to do with physical form. In the emotional sense, it's wanting things to be emotionally solid and stable. In the sattvic sense, or the sense of the spirit, it's about the structure of consciousness, solid, fixed presence. Again, every principle fits every other principle. And when you start fitting principles together and you start going upstream and working on the level of principle, you create many techniques of your own, just of your own accord, because you're connecting with truth. You're connecting with principles, and your mind starts to put together techniques. They start to happen for you. Basically, in the astrology text, in the great astrology text, for instance, especially Parashara Horasastra, which is what the system most people are studying is Parashara astrology, whether they know it or not. Parashara really hardly ever talks about techniques. It's not about techniques, it's about principles. It's all about principles. Because if you know the principles and you understand them, all the techniques just take care of themselves. You don't have to memorize a bunch of bewildering techniques. Astrological techniques, now there are techniques for sure in Parashara, but astrological techniques are things like Shadbala is a technique. And it's based on principles. Ashtaka is a technique. Gochara is a technique. Using harmonic charts, these are techniques based on principles. But, for instance, when people say, I have this thing in this harmonic chart, they're talking about a technique. That's a technique of finding an outcome. Right? So astrology teachers, we teach techniques. But there are a lot of techniques, and you can make your own techniques, actually, as long as they're based on principles, they will work. And you will see that they'll work or not, and you'll be able to tell the validity of a technique based on whether or not it's connected to a principle. And so, for instance, the four Purusharthas is another big technique. Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Everything unfolds in that order. Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha is actually related to astrology houses. The first 4 houses are related to our personal Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. House 1, 2, 3, 4. And then our interactive Rajasic Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha through houses 5 through 8. Again, this is also related to the gunas, the tamasic gunas, houses 1 through 4, which is about ourself and our presence. And then the middle section, houses 5 through 8, is related to us relating to others, which is Rajasic. So Rajasic Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha is houses 5 through 8. And then Sattvic, or the highest, most elevated Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, is houses 9 through 12. So we're fitting principles together. Once you do that, then astrology houses take on an entirely new meaning. Because now we're connecting metaphysical principles of consciousness, which is everything is evolving. How do they evolve? Through body, mind, and spirit, the 3 gunas. And then there's an inner and outer component, another metaphysical law, yin-yang, masculine, feminine, day-night, sun, moon, are the astrological component of yin-yang. Mars, Venus is another one because they represent the more active masculine, feminine, like in relationship, but in a metaphysical sense, sun, moon are the astrological component of yin-yang. And so when you find the astrological correlation to the metaphysical and the physical, because astrology also correlates to physical principles. When you look at the size of the planets, the speed of the planets, the motion of the planets, the proximity of the planets to each other, these are all scientific principles that have nothing to do with astrology. The size of something is important. How fast it moves is important. How close it is to something else is important. These things, these scientific principles also map to the astrology directly. The fact that Jupiter is a gigantic planet shows Jupiter's nature. That Jupiter sits on the outer part of the solar system and sucks up comets and protects the inner planets from all this kind of debris shows a quality of Jupiter as being a protective influence. It's good for health. It helps ward off illness. Someone is sick, you like to see that they have a Jupiter transit going through their first house and getting a Jupiter dasha. You can understand that they're going to be protected for a while, just like Jupiter in the sky. The fact that the sun is the most dominant bright force shows why he's the king. The fact that the moon is so close to the earth and moves very quickly shows the nature of the mind. So, the deeper the principle, the more it's going to relate to a metaphysical reality. Again, metaphysical principles have to do with consciousness, evolution, love, truth, dharma, karma. A scientific principle, which has to do with things like speed. Mercury is the fastest planet, except for the moon. But speed, distance, size, and the astrological principle, which has to do with things like the gunas and the elements and the 4 Purusharthas and several other things. So I'm going to now show you one of the principles, or show you a few of these principles in action.